Did everyone hear her question? Okay. It's sweet because it reminds me actually of my grandmother. Because when I first came to India, I had been here just a few months. And I went back to LA and I went to visit my grandmother. And I spent, I don't know, an hour, maybe 2 hours with her. And when I left, I spoke to my uncle on the way going back to my parents' house for my grandmother. He and I have always been very close, and he was laughing, and I said, what happened? And in the interim, since I had left seeing my grandmother and speaking to him, he had spoken to her. And obviously the whole family was very concerned, like, what's happened? My God, she's left America. One minute she was in the midst of getting a PhD, and the next minute now she's wanting to live in an ashram in Rishikesh. And, she who was never religious now suddenly wants to just live in this ashram. And so the whole family was very concerned. So my uncle had asked my grandma, how is she? Because I had gone to see my grandma first, straight from the airport. And evidently my grandma had said, well, she looks okay. And of course that just made my uncle more concerned because, you know that there's another shoe that's going to drop. And he said, well, but what do you mean she looks okay? And my grandma repeated, well, she looks okay, but, and my uncle was like, but what? And my grandma finally said, well, but she's just happy all the time. It's so funny, and yet it's also kind of sad because if I had spent the hour or two with my grandma constantly checking my watch and saying, God, Grandma, I really got to go. I'm about to hit rush hour and, I got to get home and I've got all these things to do and I just got off the plane and, oh my God, this or oh my God, that. She would have said, yeah, she's great. Perfect. 25 plus years later, say, what's the secret? I don't think it's one thing. I mean, if I had to just say one thing, I would say it's the grace of God, the grace of the Guru, the grace of Ganga. But that's pretty amorphic and not necessarily so implementable. So given that grace is there for everyone and that grace doesn't discriminate and that grace is there for with all of you, let me see if I can put that into a way that's more specifically implementable. I think the core piece of it is really what we were talking about with suffering, which is a willingness to just be open to and with whatever the present moment is presenting. I spent a lot of the first 25 years of my life trying to not feel what I was feeling. And whether I was using food or alcohol or drugs or sex, there wasn't Facebook or, anything like that at that time. But whatever numbing opportunities I had at hand, whether using any of those or just mentally checking out, I did whatever I could to not feel what I was feeling. And to use substances or relationships to not feel what the present moment was making me feel. Whether it was anger, whether it was sadness, whether it was pain, whatever it might have been. I didn't want to feel it. And so I turned to all of these different ways to not feel. And I think a major thing that has shifted is I'm no longer afraid of feeling anything. There's no longer anything that arises in me that any part of me feels like I don't want to feel that, and that I need to therefore push it away in some way. And so I think that enables me to therefore respond to each moment with the joy and the gratitude for that moment, even if it's not necessarily bringing me something that I would have chosen if I had a magic wand. But to be able to be present in that moment, knowing that whatever it is, it's all okay. And again, not that I would choose it. Not that there isn't pain or sadness or anger. There is. It's not that I've stopped having those experiences. It's just that they no longer scare me. They no longer are something that make me want to not feel them. And what I've noticed with emotions is when you're not afraid of them and you're not trying to numb them, they don't actually grab you nearly as hard. They actually tend to kind of flow like a wave that comes in and it peaks and it goes. And you'll notice this with the pain of loss. I mean, you're experiencing a very profound and very deep loss. And there's going to be pain, sadness, anguish, grief. But there's also going to be joy, because emotions are very fluid. And as a wave of pain or sadness arises, and then it dissipates, it shifts into, for example, a wave of joy. As you think about that person who you've lost that was a wave of anguish, as they are now in front of your eyes, suddenly you're full of joy because you see them and you feel them. And then maybe that joy shifts to anger. An anger that the mind says makes no sense, but nonetheless, it's there. How dare you? How dare you keep smoking, eating junky food, not wearing your seatbelt? I mean, whatever it may have been that precipitated us losing them, there's anger. Or just anger at the universe. How dare you? And then that may lead itself into a moment of even just deep laughter as you sort of hear your own voice scolding this person you love of the same thing that you had scolded them for 40 or 50 years. And then there's again a moment. And they're like waves of the ocean, and they arise and they peak and they crash and they change and they arise but they don't drown you as long as you allow them to come. And I think that's one of the key secrets. And And I think gratitude is another one. I find myself just infinitely grateful all the time. I find the universe so incredibly giving. And I find myself such an undeserving, and I don't mean that in any kind of personal belittling sort of way, but just in a really just honest, aware sort of way, just a very undeserving being of the grace and the blessings. And so I find myself just constantly in a state of awe and gratitude at the way that the universe just keeps showering blessings upon us through really no merit of our own. I mean, we're just here, and the universe just keeps giving us all of these blessings. And I think those two things are probably key to that smile. You know, when we lose a loved one, it gives us really, along with the anguish and pain, such an incredible opportunity to connect with that being, soul to soul and energy to energy, rather than body to body. And that doesn't take away the loss of the physical body, but it reminds us that we've been given this opportunity to actually drop into the part of us that isn't our body in order to connect with the part of them that isn't their body. So our physical body can connect with their physical body. Our intellectual mind connects with their intellectual mind. We have a conversation or a debate or whatever it may be. Our emotional heart connects to their emotional heart. But our soul connects to their soul. And when they no longer have a body or a brain or that personal emotional heart, they still have soul. They still are soul. And so it sends us into the soul of ourselves to connect with them. And that's a very beautiful opportunity. Not that it takes away the pain of loss any, but it's a yes and rather than an either or.